As I completely knocked the entire display.
And you have to talk to the microphone, otherwise we won't get audio.
All right. So make sure to miss the microphone so that this is entirely not worth recording. Gotta understand, entirely self-deprecating.
Good afternoon again, everybody. We're going to move ahead with our next speaker, Nick Jacob. He's going to talk about the path well traveled, common mistakes encountered with the SIEM. Nick, just a little bit about Nick for those of you who may not be familiar with him. He's a security consultant, a dashing swashbuckler, a martial artist, a snake wrangler. He's both professional and unprofessional at the same time. But when in the security space, he occupies himself with SIEM technology, including but not limited to QRadar and Alien Vault. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Nick Jacob.
So, as has been introduced. No, you're good. I actually prefer this because it allows me a delay tactic. I'm always afraid of my timing on it.
This is like your only slide, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the problem because I just had to reboot this and everything else disappeared.
That's never happened to you before.
I know, right? Horror stories and flashbacks. It's awful. So, my talk is The Path Well Traveled, Common Mistakes Encountered with SIEM. Originally, I was going to title this 5 Mistakes, but I started adding more mistakes and more problems, and then I realized I should probably stick to some of the big ones that I've seen. A fair disclaimer, I am a bit egotistical, I am overly talented, and I am an expert at SIEM.
And only one of those is true.
Exactly.
Decide which one it is.
Precisely. Do we have prizes?
Yeah, give that man a prize.
No, you're good. Again, like I said, I actually like this more. It prevents me from highlighting just how poor my timing is. So, my name is Nick Jacob. I am a consultant, I guess. My title's a little bit in flux right now. I worked with QRadar, Alien Vault, Splunk now, and a few other SIEM technologies. And what do I do in my free time? Well, like the previous talker said, I do occupy myself with martial arts and things like that. I am a pirate with some ramifications of acting upon piracy, and I'm a snake wrangler and monster hunter. In fact, that would be my wife. But I currently work at Hurricane Labs, where the bio for me on the pamphlet is a little out of date, and that's mostly my fault. So,
Mostly?
entirely. So what is SIEM? Security Information and Event Management. Fancy way of saying looking at logs and seeing what happens and how do you respond to them. Some of the things that you can do with this are monitoring programs. I know some people try to build their own monitoring program, which I find to be a great mistake.
You're not allowed to troll the audience, I'm sorry.
I'm not allowed to troll the audience. Some people have wasted their lives on fruitless endeavors. So, but what I'm primarily focused upon are some of the appliances that you've seen. I named a few at the beginning of this. Some work better than others, and your mileage may vary depending on the flavor of tool that you like to implement. Most of my professional career has been focused with IBM's QRadar. In fact, that's pretty much how I got introduced into the SIEM environment, was through a financial company and running the security program through that. Since then, we've moved on to, over at VioPoint, they work with Alien Vault and QRadar. And then further, over at Hurricane, they work with Splunk, where it's incredibly modular, incredibly powerful, and really freaking cool to look at some of the alerting that it's got. I know, is it you guys that work with ArcSight?
Yes.
I'll even plug you guys. See how kind I am? CBI works with ArcSight, which is why you should go with Hurricane. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, we can discuss that until Ragnarok. But we're here to discuss some of the mistakes I've seen when implementing a SIEM solution into a company's security posture. And for that, I bring to you the first mistake. Now, this is a common one for pretty much any implementation of technology within an organization. Almost every C-level executive or director will make this mistake at one point, and that is believing something to be a turnkey solution. all you need to do is buy the box, plug it into your network, and it will do the thing. That is a lie. A SIEM requires careful investment and understanding of the technology's capabilities. Don't ever believe the salesperson. I say this having given the talk before with a salesperson in the audience who is saying, well, wait, we're not that bad. No offense, but yes, you are. You are evil. You do your job well, but you are evil. What a SIEM is not is insta-use. One size fits all. A small investment. So, don't be guilty of the sin of false idolatry. Idolatry. Whatever. I like the word. Believing this blinky box will bring you salvation. It is not a matter of just throwing money at technology. That was really fast. It's going to take time to develop the program. It's not going to solve all your problems. It's not going to be able to work right outside of the box, right out of the box. And you may have to invest some money in people to go with it. Which brings us to the second mistake. Not applying the appropriate manpower. Some may recall, I just said that a SIEM was not a small investment. In fact, I listed some of the things, and in fact the talk before, if you were here for it, was an excellent example of some of the things a SIEM will require in order to run a successful security program. Time. Not just for the installation, because a lot of people in a lot of companies I've encountered and dealt with believe that that's all that it required was a physical installation into their server rack. Not just some understanding on what buttons to push, but on how to read event logs. What certain event logs mean, what certain alarms mean, certain rules might entail. And it requires cooperation. You're going to need people to run this. One guy will likely go insane. One of those things of staring into the face of Cthulhu.
And next thing you know, he's playing with snakes and doing martial arts.
Exactly. Next thing you know, he's playing with snakes and doing martial arts, thinks he's a pirate and all kinds of things. They become weird. That's the question. In fact, if you want to talk about... Okay, I've got a few jokes, but we'll save them for later. But you're going to need... That person's going to need some support, either from, say, the help desk, from other professionals, from the team that you're assigning to be the monitoring for your organization. And they're going to need the time in order to actually familiarize themselves, orient, and move forward. And assigning the wrong support can really be as damaging as not assigning support. If you get the people that want to blow the whistle on everything, they want to blow the breach horn and say, the Chinese are coming, every time that an alarm goes off, well, that person's really going to burn every bridge in the organization as they annoy everybody. Turns out you really need to be careful when you're seeing, oh, this laptop's doing something funky. Okay, call the help desk and quarantine. Well, that turned out to be the CEO's laptop, and he didn't care for that response. And considering the fact that it's his signature on your paycheck, his opinion matters. You need the people that can actually appropriately respond and choose exactly how they're going to go about pushing for either security changes or to follow up on those alarms. And the third mistake, speaking of that, is not following up on alerting, which turns out has a fun counterpart, following up on too many things. You can't just ignore alarms, because sooner or later there's going to be an audit coming, and you're going to get questions about, well, why didn't you follow up on this one? It says malware and running rampant in the network. Well, because we know it's not malware, we know it's this. Well, why does it exist then? Why is that rule there, or why hasn't that been fixed? And then you're going to kind of be caught with your pants down. That always goes well with auditing, I hear. But following up on too many things, well, when the help desk starts out as this, I'm going with the smiley, not the creepy eyes, but I thought it was cool looking. And then ends up like this whenever you call, you done goofed. Turns out they'll only deal with the call from the security guy so many times and follow up on so many false positives before they actually realize this guy has absolutely no idea of what he's talking about, and don't really know if we want to follow his lead on some of these things. So that's something that a careful balance has to be struck upon, and you need to have the appropriate people that'll be able to perform the investigations, to be able to look into those alerts, to be able to look and figure out what's going on for real, so that by the time the help desk hears about it and are told, hey, we need you to quarantine this laptop, they know that this guy means business. They know that, well, he hasn't led us astray yet. And hopefully they don't just think of you as the doom bringer, the guy that just comes saying, hear ye, that person there's been infected. Burn him.
One time.
Funny story. If you mistype /dot.org to /door. What was it? Com?
I don't even want to remember. Yeah.
They are not the same thing, but they help populate porn filters. That was a fun encounter. Okay, in Wolf's defense in this instance, he was sleep deprived, so take that as you will. But it was funny to be like, it was literally I really love to populate some of these. Like, they've got all these lists in there, and we've got nothing in them. Whoa. That is not the same thing. Sweet. What's that you just went to? But
No, I think that was a good example of testing your security, making sure they're paying attention, following up on alerts.
it's true. But it's kind of like a short follow-up when it's what you looking at over there? That doesn't seem workplace appropriate. In fact, I think that may be an HR violation. But,
Violation, yeah.
right, handbook. Sorry. We have a handbook. The fourth mistake is incorrectly loading it or configuring it. So, if you've ever, how many people here have actually set up a SIEM in their environment or on their client? How many times have you encountered the situation of, well, just point all the data sources at it? Has anybody tried to? Yeah, exactly. It was that. I had a client, one of my favorite clients ever, who was like, hey, it's awesome. What's awesome? Just pointed another 300 log sources at QRadar. You did what? Well, when? About 5 minutes ago. You should be seeing the alerts now. And there's offenses, alarms are going off. They're, like, everything that they were not properly organized to do was now causing me a ton of undue stress. Now, it was good for my metrics, which were based on alarms or offenses closed, because I had, I think, 3,000 that week, because most of them were nothing. But how many actual security events fell through the cracks at that point? I couldn't tell you. Simply because there was so much noise that the actual nuggets of real information went right by me as I had to mass close things to maintain at least a semblance of a clean environment. So that's dealing with the flood of information. Because you know what these guys are saying? They're saying that. Pretty sure that's what they're saying. They might be saying something else. Something a little more tragic. In fact, I'm pretty sure about that now. But
That's pretty much the face you made when we added those events.
yeah, that part was true. I just kind of hugged. Yeah, that one was a euphemism, but I had to leave the room for that. But the other part of it, not configuring it properly, well, not tuning alarms. Now, this is annoying, but wow, that's even annoying from the projector. This was even more annoying when it was given in a dark room, which I was kind of hoping I would give, because you have people chasing ghosts, you have people looking into alarms, such as a flood of DNS traffic coming from various foreign countries that really shouldn't have been happening. I'm going to change that momentarily, because blinking in the corner of my eye is driving me mad. But all of that causes your teammates, the people that should be working alongside you, to have to look elsewhere. They have to spend their time chasing their tails, going after ghosts and finding out, oh, that's nothing. But like I said, in case of an audit, you can't just say, well, we ignored it because we knew it was nothing, especially when there's that many. So you need to actually tune them, figuring out what the alarms, what the thresholds for certain alerts should be. Figure out what's necessary for each organization and where it can be properly implemented, and figure out what's the critical assets and work around that. So that brings me to the next point, tuning in correctly. I mean, let's be honest. If a company isn't interested in PCI compliance, then why am I using PCI compliance standards to alert upon? There are databases with personal information that should be alerted on. It depends on what the industry is that determines what they want to be monitoring. One example that I can give is that there was a talk given a while back at another con about, well, you need to build, buying a SIEM is pointless, you should build your own. And if you remember towards the earlier part of my talk, which you should because it wasn't that long ago, I think that's a dumb idea, because part of the problem is when you try to build your own, you're the guy that has to maintain it. And that becomes a way to start tearing your own hair out after the first maintenance cycle. But one of the things was you have to be able to identify what is an organization's primary interest. So when the example of a hospital was given, this person being a primarily internal person thought, well, that means you're interested in the personal information, of the health records of the people that go there. No, a hospital's main interest is in people staying alive. And it turns out you have to also be aware of what's going on in the business in that sense, because say you do a discovery scan with a newly plugged in SIEM product, and you're in a hospital, and you shut down their baby monitors. Turns out that's frowned upon by an organization. Those are important to a hospital. So you have to be able to build the security posture and build their monitoring program around that. So, but in truth, business doesn't care about it. Does it really help to report it? And I don't mean business as an executive, because an executive doesn't care about a lot of things that they probably really should. And I know I probably have a little too much like higher up hate. I don't mean it as that. But frankly, if you're part of the business unit, you might not know what goes on the technical side. But if it truly doesn't matter to the company, if it doesn't impact business operations at all, then that's not where your focus should be, at least not in the beginning of the program. Your focus should be on what's critical, what do we need to watch on. If their primary thing is patents or something along those lines, IPs, they need then having security and focusing your monitoring around the database that stores most of their intellectual property is probably more important to them in that manner. Which, that brings me to the next one, the fifth mistake. Not utilizing the operational capability of a SIEM. So what I mean by this is using the SIEM to, instead of tuning the appliance itself, tune the network. This is something I push every time I talk to a client, every time I'm in a meeting, say, hey, it would actually be better if we could fix this on your environment rather than having to just ignore it. Going back to one of my favorite clients, who turned out to be, he was Mr. Overeager, but at the same time, had the networking team on all our calls, had his firewall guys there, had everybody, at least one person that could influence some level of change in the network on these meetings. So it's like, well, we're seeing Dropbox LAN sync traffic that's going all over. It's being blocked at the local firewall. It's like, awesome. Give me those IPs. We'll fix that on the user side, because that isn't allowed on our network. So he would go to those people. Most of them weren't doing anything malicious, but didn't know they had that service enabled, and they would either turn it off, remove Dropbox. In 9 out of 10 cases in the instance, they weren't even using Dropbox. They had installed it and kind of just forgot they had it. But they took the information that we gave and went and fixed it on their side. So rather than having to ignore the process, it was now gone and no longer causing noise. So that when traffic started using those ports again, well, now we knew it wasn't them. Or at least, following up on it was much simpler. And in some cases, you notice other things. I mean, I've seen some stuff. Have you ever seen your network team DOS their own domain controllers because they didn't properly configure, say, their network monitoring solution? I still, to this day, the word SolarWinds will piss me off. I still have a twitch because we didn't configure it properly, and whenever it went to pull the domain controls to see what processes were running, would basically push them to their limit, so it would stop being able to report back. So what does SolarWinds try to do because it wasn't configured properly? It pulls it again. That would fail. So it would pull it again. And do you see what's happening here? We're like, why is DC5 failing so much? Wait, what do you mean it's at 100% utilization? That doesn't make any sense. You're doing what? Use this opportunity, use these tools to actually, well, to fix the problem areas. You can actually go through and configure things and go and tighten your security posture through the use of SIEM technology, simply because you've got the logs, they're all in one place, and in fact, most of the time the SIEM will give you the story that you need to tell in order to promote this fix. Use it. It should be used to fix problem areas. Because I would rather, personally, have an effective, sensitive alarm than one that's been configured to ignore a lot of the traffic. To actually go with a story of ignoring a lot of the traffic, and to go back on one that just popped into my mind, because this was a more recent story than this talk is. During a pen test, we were going through the network. We actually found their honeypot. We tripped all the alarms on it by accident. And we're like, well, that was clumsy. Nobody's contacting us. We ended up finding their Splunk instance and finding out that nobody had followed up on any alarms in a long time, including ours, which we now could mark as red. We could now shuffle away. We could delete. Nobody would have any evidence that, in fact, we had tripped one of their alarms, one that was actually configured properly. That was mind-blowing to me that somebody had done this and not bothered to actually have anybody follow up on it. They were pretty good security controls to boot, but tree falls in the forest and nobody's there. Does the sound really even matter? Or the fact that the tree fell? So don't think you need to focus on the lone tool. And I'm sorry for the derailment. I consider it a superpower that I'm able to be as distracted as I can get even on myself. But don't focus on the lone tool of the SIEM. Actually utilize it to improve everything else in your network. And one of my favorite ones is the sixth mistake, because this actually gives you a chance to play. Testing on tuning that has been performed. If you're in the consultant space, then involve the red team. If you're on the internal side, see if you can justify some red team exercises of your own. Heck, I'm going to plug something that has been bored into me to death from working with this guy. Threat model. Actually lay out some of those attacks and see, hey, okay, this is how this is how these guys got into this company. Okay, how would we have detected this attack? Well, we would have noticed exfiltrating data. Would you really? Are you sure? Do it in a harmless way, but do it and see if you actually alert on that. See if the tool's been configured properly in order to follow up on that. Frankly, put your money where your mouth is, and luckily, in this instance, your job shouldn't be on the line. If it is, then, well, threat model more carefully. But this is a chance to do some of the red team stuff and have some fun with it. Like, hey, if you guys manage to pass this test, I'm buying you all pizza. Because everybody likes pizza. But push the rules to the limit. And I accidentally put this twice and made it bigger for emphasis. But think like a pen tester. Be creative. Think of ways. Okay, one of my favorite things was when we're threat modeling. All right, we put this rule in. Has anybody here met Josh Little? Yeah, I hear you two should know this guy. work with him. But he came into this room while we're all, yeah, good job on that. Good job on this threat model, bro. And we're like, yeah. And he comes up, he's like, yeah, I'd get around that by doing this. But we'll do this. And we put in a counterpoint. Then we'll just do this. Well, we'll add this to it. By the end of it, we had a whole whiteboard filled with ports and alerting based on different account activities. And this was all in way too complicated of a rule, but it was a fun as hell day to build a series of rules around that. Use those engagements, see if you can get a pen tester guy. I mean, hell, there's Calvin right there. He works for us. You should talk to him if you're internal. And in fact, hire Hurricane. But really, see if you can do some research into the pen testing stuff, because everybody likes reading about it, but trust me, you don't necessarily want to do it because there's a lot of report writing. But do the research, be creative about it, and figure out how you would break the people that are on your team, both emotionally and professionally, and make it a party. And of course, don't necessarily admit that you don't trust the tuning and the person doing it, but you really shouldn't trust the tuning or the guy doing it. I mean, have you guys bothered to review any of the work that I've done? Okay, don't you nod at me, Hartwick. Actually, I fully believe that he has double-checked my work because that's the kind of person he is. But a SIEM appliance is a versatile tool. It can alert on all manner of things. I just realized, very close to the end of my talk, I've talked way too freaking fast again. But, on that point, and double entendres allowed, it should be treated as a versatile tool. Use it to maximize your security posture in your environment, both from the alerting standpoint and from tightening up the network itself. Use it to generate the alarms that would be necessary in order to have those sexy stories of, hey, we caught this guy who was terminated last week, still able to log in, which is another fun thing. Have the use cases in place. For some of those stories, you have things like, well, we figured out that the VPN hadn't been configured properly, so if their connection was still left open, well, the SIEM would alert that there was a disabled account attempting to log back in, but the ops team couldn't see them because their account no longer existed, but they were still connected. All you needed to do was reboot the VPN server, but we didn't know about that until we set that rule in motion. Be aware, you can have things like, if you're a financial company, you're probably interested in, what was it? What was the word? Quantitative analysis. Basically, it means, here's the things where I think the money's going to go. And, they're about this size, and files that size were just being uploaded to somebody else's personal cloud storage. Well, you should probably follow up on that, because that's the guy with the money, with the golden goose for this company. And you should probably see just what he's uploading and what he's doing with that. So build the use cases, have the stories to tell, follow up on it, apply that appropriate manpower. Don't make some of the mistakes that I've seen in there. And now, honestly, you guys have been much, much quieter than my sec is, which is a problem, because I kind of thrive on that heckling. And so far, Wolf's been towing the line for all of you people.
I do what I do, the big shoulders.
Exactly. So, on that note, and very, very reluctantly, do I have any questions? Yeah.
So, smart writing is SIEM. Where can I buy the best pirate shirts?
Where can you buy the best pirate shirts?
Well, if I expect that the end result is madness, and I go down that road, then
Do you have a website you can recommend?
Honestly, if you really want to know, are you talking about dressing like a pirate or shirts related to piracy?
yes.
Okay, Disney has some great ones. Otherwise, there is a website, tobeapirate.com. That is not a joke.
So you start off going down open source software, and you end up on tobeapirate.com. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
somewhere in between those methods.
So you're writing your own?
Yeah, right. Every GitHub page.
It's in the comments, really. Eventually the comments just all start to be in pirate speak. It'll be hilarious. Anything else? Because I had questions about like sim tuning and all kinds of things.
So what were your 5 points again?
I had 6.
What were your 6 points again?
I had 6, so I held up 3 fingers. My first one was it is not understanding the capabilities of the technology.
Okay.
So believing that it is instant use, plug and play, and ready to roll. The second was not applying the appropriate manpower. Having people that, frankly, and I don't mean it as an offense to you, I don't know if you were given a SIM. The issue that I brought up earlier where somebody gave a talk about wanting to build their own instead of using it, he was given a fully deployed SIM environment, although it had been deployed incorrectly. They did pretty much every other mistake I told you about. They overloaded it with information, none of the tuning had been done, and they just kind of threw the intern at it. Said, here you go. You like security, right? Here's your thing. And he's like, well, this sucks. I have no idea what this tool's doing. I have no idea what any of these alarms mean. I can build my own better than this thing will work. Which, in his instance, might have been the case. He was more of a developer than a security professional. But, and I really don't mean this as much of an insult as it's going to come off, I really don't see him in the security space anymore either. He's either like waist deep maintaining his tool and thus not really speaking of many cons, or active on Twitter, or active pretty much anywhere, or kind of said, you know what, this security stuff kind of sucks, I'm going back to developing. That's more my thing. I can do more work there than wasting my time banging my head against all this useless information. Peace, I'm out. The third was it not tuning? Yeah, it was not tuning. It was not loading it correctly. I'm all kinds of sane. I've had tons of sleep and everything. I'm sure most of us can relate to that. Not following up on alerts. Thank you, because I'm failing my own test now. Not following up on alerts. You don't want to leave a SIM. What?
Not you.
Oh, okay. So it was him.
Yes.
Okay. We'll have words, Hartwick.
You had a question?
Me?
This gentleman right behind you.
Yeah,
You have a
yeah.
question?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, actually, you're just talking about the incorrect deployments of SIEM. So, what's the best time you think for the ordinary experienced security consultant to do the deployment?
So
2 weeks or 2 months?
In 2 weeks, and how many interns?
that depends. I was going to say, that depends. Do you plan on those interns actually surviving? Honestly, that depends on the size of the engagement. I mean, if it's a company that has, say, 300 servers, we pointed 10 data sources at the SIM per week, basically checked and saw what they were, made sure that each phase of this deployment, it was a variety of log sources, so domain controller, firewall, VPN server, mail server, made sure they had a nice bit of variety, and then we pointed at them, saw what alerts were generated, organized all those log sources, and made sure that everything was either false positives had been tuned out, to ignore certain traffic because the ops team's just not going to change its configuration of that, or this noise is actually a false positive in general because something's wrong on the SIM side. And then we bring in the next wave of data sources, point them at the SIM, see what kind of alerts, and what you notice is, in fact, you're able to bring them faster and faster because as you organize them more and more, everything is by the end of the deployment tuned out pretty well. So we had, 3 months of straight deployments with some testing and stuff, some snafus of like, hey, we're not going to be doing any deployments this week because of X reason, but it took us about 3 months to deploy it, and then it was up and running, and we had it steadily and accurately monitoring for well over a year. mainly because of outside reasons to the company itself, but where we were able to implement new rules, new use cases, and build new threat models for the SIEM to alert upon in that time. So it depends on the speed of which you want to deploy. I mean, hey, you can be aggressive. You can be my overeager client and say, hey, I just pointed 300 log sources at it in the past week, and we're that much closer to having 1,500 instead of 300. But I prefer to do it in phases so that we can make sure that we maximize every bit of efficiency the SIEM has before something falls through and something generates more noise than we really know how to deal with.
So is it typical to have the consultant to establish some kind of user case during this deployments?
In the case of me, in the case of the arguments that I would bring up, I would say you should have a use case for any kind of new rule or adjustment of the rule, simply because, one, it brings up a good documentation standard. Two, I believe you're probably on the internal side rather than the consultant side. From the consultant perspective, we want to be able to replicate our efforts in as many environments as possible. So it's good for us. From the internal side, it provides a lot of good documentation if you're hiring new people, if you want to maintain, like, hey, why'd new guy put this rule together, and why aren't we seeing the same traffic we were before? Well, here's the use case, here's his logic, here's the searches he put into it, and here's what he did. And now we actually deal with less noise and less distractions than we were before. And then you may give new guy a high five. Or you may chastise new guy because he did it wrong. Simply so that you have that follow-up that's possible. Yes.
Would you say with great power comes great responsibility?
God, would you believe that I've already dropped that line once?
Yeah, not even joking.
I did. We did a podcast for Hurricane, and I actually dropped a Spider-Man line in a podcast, my first podcast with a new company. So, thank you, Ben. Yes, with the great power of a SIEM comes great responsibility.
Serious question. If I'm trying to detect who it was in Ode, what type of SIEM rules would I need? Oh, wait, do I need Palo Alto? Can Palo Alto be my SIEM? Who else has other questions here for Dave? I think I need to. Before you go.
Yeah.
Egotistic?
We want to know which one.
Yeah.
Yes.
So is being a pirate just a felt life goal because you couldn't be a ninja? Sorry.
No. Well, I'm just going to argue this. The thing about being a pirate is that I can be flashy and full of myself and show off. But the thing about being a ninja, and to quote a good friend of mine, ninjas don't take selfies. So you don't quite get to brag as much. I mean, maybe your other ninja buddies will appreciate the fact that,
Or actually, you take selfies, we just hide behind other people while they're taking their selfies.
Right, it just looks like we're just in a wilderness scene. You can't see anybody. Just like someone's in the shadows.
still argue that somebody else is taking the credit, and as a pirate, I cannot have that. All right. Thank you all very much. You have a great con.